well, thank you guys. I'll go ahead and get started. I'm Elissa Ballman. I'm also a PhD student at the University of Maine. I work in the vector ecology lab under Dr. Ali Gardner. And today I'm going to be talking about the timber harvesting impacts on black-legged ticks. So the first project I want to talk about is a community science project we did a few years ago called the Maine Forest Tick Survey. And this was a 2-year study that we ran in 2020 and 2021. And this was a project where we recruited private forest landowners here in the state of Maine, or there in the state of Maine, I should say, that own between 5 and 1,000 wooded acres. And we had a huge response. We had over 300 people apply in the first year to be involved in this project. And of the people, we had a really high completion rate of over 83% of all our participants completed all aspects of the project, which was very labor intensive, which I'm going to get into just now. So all of our volunteers collected data 2 different ways. They filled out sort of extensive surveys that was asking different questions about their sort of attitudes and beliefs on ticks and tick-borne pathogens. They also went out into their forests and did a number of forest vegetation measurements. And then they filled out sort of extensive histories of their forest management practices on their land, including when was the last time they had a timber harvest. In addition to filling out all that information, which was already time consuming, they were also trained to actively collect ticks on their properties. So we trained them to use drag cloths to go out to these places on their properties that they've had some sort of forest management, or in the case of some people never had any forest management. And then they dragged for ticks and submitted those ticks to us for ID. So I'm just going to very briefly talk about some of the results. So this is looking at the years since the last timber harvest. And so we have years, 0 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 20, 20 plus years since the timber harvest, and then never. And never is kind of a little dicey category, just because some people may have owned the property for a shorter period of time and they say, well, I've never had a timber harvest. But it doesn't mean there wasn't a timber harvest on the property at some point. And then we have the number of black-legged tick nymphs per collection period on those properties. And what you can see here is that there are significantly fewer black-legged tick nymphs on these properties that have been harvested anytime in the last 20 years, which we were sort of surprised. I feel like a lot of us, sort of understand immediately after a timber harvest, there'd be fewer ticks, but it's interesting how long the effect lasted. And so that brings us to our current project that we're working on, which is a long-term timber harvesting project. And we're working out at a place called Fry Mountain Wildlife Management Area, seen here in the yellow box. And then here's a zoomed in picture where we're working. And as part of their wildlife management goals, they do timber harvesting in different parts of this area. So for example, we have our 4 sites here that are controls that are never have any timber harvesting. We have a large area here that they've clear cut that we have 4 samples we're sampling in. And then we have what we're calling patch cuts. These are 1 to 2 acre plots that have had a timber harvest. And so if we zoom in on these patch cuts, we're sampling kind of 2 different areas within these harvested areas. So we have the area in purple that has been harvested. So this is what some of them look like post-harvest. And then we're also sampling the ticks in that sort of boundary perimeter area to see how that also is impacted by the timber harvesting as well. And so, like I said, this is a long-term study. We're currently on year 4 of 20. So check back in 16 years for some results. But like I said, we're doing the tick dragging as well as doing a number of vegetation measurements, including looking at understory composition, canopy closure, different leaf litter characteristics, as well as microclimate, looking at temperature and humidity in these areas. And so we're really trying to see how this is changing over time. And we're looking at it over a pretty long time span to see just how this changes and how that impacts the tick populations. So with that, I just want to thank our funding sources, and I want to thank all the amazing volunteer citizen scientists that we had that worked on this project.